So if a deal does or does not happen, how does that affect most Americans? Joining us with some answers is Roben Farzad, senior writer for Bloomberg Businessweek. Great to have you with us, Roben.
Thanks for having me.
And already you're seeing the ripple effect of this uncertainty on the markets. But what's the ripple effect on average Americans if this thing doesn't happen?
It's mostly going to be psychological throughout the week. If people suddenly start perceiving that the unthinkable of, one, a credit rating downgrade for the U.S., and two, an actual technical default, if we hit the August 2 debt ceiling deadline happens, you're going to see banks not wanting to make loans. You're going to see car dealerships suddenly getting iffy about extending credit to you, and everybody's going to feel it.
Because all that uncertainty leads them to feel uncertain about taking greater risk, giving money to consumers. Consumers are the lifeblood of this economy. So how does the economy behave if all of a sudden consumers can't get the money to spend?
Well, it's already a credit-starved economy. We know that. That's the chief complaint, that banks are not lending out there. You're just giving banks another reason to not lend there. If they can't take for granted that the government is good for its obligations, if they don't see past August 2nd, if there's no visibility, everything stops. And by the way, everything stops in the international economy because everything is ultimately linked to the U.S. dollar and the U.S. Treasury bond. I mean, that's the risk-free rate. It's the benchmark the world over.
How about everything stopping when it comes to the checks that people anticipate? 80 million Americans, according to the Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, could be at risk of not receiving Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Is that a legitimate concern?
It is a legitimate concern because you as the Treasury Secretary, ultimately the guy who writes these checks out and cuts these checks, you're going to be at a fork in the road come August 2nd if an agreement isn't reached. Do we pay pensioners, people out there who require our entitlement obligations, or do we pay the people who are crediting the U.S. government chiefly? You're not going to be able to do both unless there is an extension of the debt ceiling.
They have to make a decision without that extension, and it might not be good for a lot of people.
And it's a horrible decision to make if you have to choose between one or the other. Imagine the political or financial repercussions. It's kind of, heads I win, tails you lose.
One thing that Americans certainly are concerned about is their retirement savings. What happens to retirement savings here?
It's going to happen, in terms of the market reaction to retirement savings. Already we've seen bond yields at such lows. Paradoxically, even while Washington is messing around, Treasury yields are actually lower than when we were running a surplus 10, 12 years ago. It shows you that there isn't a direct relationship. But if markets start to become more volatile, we're coming off of an epic crash in 2008. Certainly this is the worst time for the economy to feel that already when consumer sentiment is low. And there's been a stock market recovery that's been somewhat of a boon to consumer confidence.
So you may actually see that recovery go away in this scenario.
You might see it go away, but a lot depends on what happens over the next 48 and 72 hours. So watch closely.
Absolutely. Roben Farzad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.